My name is Tejaswini Niranjana. I'm Director of the Center for Inter-Asian Research at Ahmedabad University. I'm delighted that we have you all with us at the start of a brand new webinar series that the center is hosting. I have with me my other colleagues in the Hong Kong South Asia Network. You will get to know them because they will be moderating, introducing, and co-hosting with me as well. I won't talk about them all here. I just want to say that the Center for Inter-Asian Research is conducting research along a number of vectors. One of them is the Indian Ocean and beyond. And that is sort of like a parallel project, if you like, to the South Asia and the South China Sea. So some of the other work that we do and in the webinar domain has to do with perceptions of risk in the Himalayas, because we have an initiative called Himalayan Asia. We conduct research across a number of different domains, including music and food. And these are also, broadly speaking, comparative projects to do with India and East Asia, or South Asia and East Asia. So we are really delighted to be able to host Ping-hsiu Alice Lin, who is, in addition to having known her for a number of years as a wonderful grad student from Hong Kong, but who's currently based at Harvard. I do want to mention that her dissertation won the Inter-Asia Cultural Studies Society's prize, the first prize for the best dissertation of the year. So many congratulations again to her. And we had the pleasure of hosting her at Ahmedabad a few months ago to receive the prize and speak about her work. So it's great to have another opportunity then to have her present. And I will now ask my colleague, Laila Bevena at the Chinese University of Hong Kong to introduce the speaker.
Thanks so much, Tejaswini. It's really my pleasure to introduce Ping-hsiu Alice Lin, who is currently a postdoctoral fellow in the Department of Anthropology at Harvard University and was previously an Academy Scholar at Harvard. She was also a doctoral fellow at the Center for Global Asia in New York University, Shanghai, and is an alumnus of my department, the Department of Anthropology at Chinese University in Hong Kong. I had the pleasure of reading Ping's dissertation, and her current book manuscript is entitled Precious Economies, Labor, Place, and Value in the Afghanistan-Pakistan Borderlands, which examines the colored stone trade in Northwest Pakistan and adjacent regions, looking at links of imperialism, mining, artisanship, geosciences, and commodity chains. So we're really excited for this talk, and especially I'm very excited to connect with the Center for Inter-Asia Research in Ahmedabad and bring together scholars working on South Asia here in Hong Kong as well. So please. And after the talk, we will have a brief Q&A, so please stick around for that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. I'm zooming in from Boston, so it's early morning for me. So I'll begin by thanking the organizers and hosts at Ahmedabad University and my former university, Chinese University of Hong Kong, for offering me this opportunity to share a part of my in-progress manuscript. And my thanks especially to Satvik for all the technical support. So as Professor Vavina mentioned, my broader project examines the intertwined relationship between place and value in the laborious rendering of minerals that are mined in the Hindu-Kush Himalayan region into what we come now to know as precious stones, right, for the global luxury markets. So the bulk of my fieldwork research was done primarily in Pakistan, but I also moved to Thailand as well as the hinterland mines in Afghanistan, where many of these gems originate. But what I present today, however, is drawn from a chapter from my in-progress manuscript, drawn from my fieldwork in Sri Lanka, as I followed my interlocutors to a wholesale hub for corundum across the Indian Ocean. So this paper is drawn from this chapter that demonstrates that it is only by following sapphires that you see in the slide here that more material and novel kinds of networks and relations come to light. In charting the lives and itineraries of my main interlocutors, Pakistani gem dealers, I came to know of the larger South and Southeast Asian world beyond my base in Peshawar, northwest of Pakistan. The circuit of the corundum trade in particular took one either to new sites of sapphire production in Southwest Madagascar, or to long-established traditional processing and transformation centers in Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand. So my interlocutor's pursuit of a certain kind of precious material, the sapphire, produces what the anthropologist George Marcus has described as the intended and unintended consequences in the network or complex connections within a system of places. So this is just a map to give you a sense of all the sites and hubs that are connected through the sapphire trade. Sapphires and rubies, both varieties of the mineral corundum, links these coastal cities across Asia through networks of trade and production. Heeding Eng Seng-ho's proposal for a thick transregionalism, I want to show here how the sapphire trade too constructs a spatially expansive and yet integrative regional world across Asia. Specifically, I want to ask today is what might we make of the interplay between the emotive qualities of sapphires and the unintended kin it forges in the marketplace, and what kinds of imagined communities, right, if not national or otherwise, do the circulation of these precious goods create? So I argue that the gem trade, which in many ways predates by far the arrival of the nation state, creates and sustains imagined communities, or to use Nancy Munn's words, regional worlds that are characterized by kinship, trust, and debt. To do this, I explore how the pursuit of a coveted shade of blue sapphire forged specific kinship ties, regimes of values, and imagined communities in the marketplace. In speaking to the ways in which regional worlds are experienced, I'm using phenomenology here as a lived methodology in how I conducted fieldwork and in interpreting how these worlds are made through these experiences and kinship and materiality. So my approach is really informed by the practices of my interlocutors, whose very livelihoods are dominated by acute sensory experiences, right, involving sight and tactility in their work. So, sorry, this is just a slide of a map to show you all the sort of gem occurring deposits in Sri Lanka, and it will be important in a second. So in February 2019, midway through my long-term ethnographic fieldwork in Pakistan, I decided to expand my research to Sri Lanka. Two of my key interlocutors in Peshawar frequently traveled there. Long famed as the Island of Gems, this is a title in Buddhist and Arabic literature, Sri Lanka was an important source and destination for gemstones, and it remains one of the most important source and destination for sapphires. However, among gem dealers in Pakistan, one would often hear the word Ceylon, a colonial name that has taken on several meanings, indexing the post-colonial state, the corundum, the mineral corundum for sale, and also the nuances for shade that add value. So for one interlocutor and or dealer is the most common market parlance, I'll call Shehzad, it became also a site of familiarity, kinship, and potential. I will turn to his story later. So sapphire, sapphire refers to this blue variety of the mineral corundum, which occurs naturally in metamorphic rocks and stream sediments that you see in the the slide here. This is in Ratnapura. So the most desirable of the blue sapphires in the industry, when of comparable size and clarity, they can be appraised chiefly according to two features, which is one is color, which we'll talk a lot about, and geographic origin, which I delve more into in the book. These two colors known as cornflower or royal blue that you see on the right of the slide, royal, the extreme right, and then cornflower in the middle. These hues surface as some of the most favored, right, for their vivid tones in the luxury economy. As the anthropologist Patricia Spires describes, color embodies sensory qualities that also animate people and objects. So the sapphire trade relies on these sensory transactions, right, that shape both subjects and objects. And royal blue, for instance, gained popularity in the 19th century among Russian nobility and spread through imperial jewelers to Western Europe. And up until today, there is no definitive international standard that exists for grading sapphire color. So each gemological institution or laboratory, as they like to call themselves, attribute the color grade. So this is a color chart given by the gemological lab called Lotus Gemology in Thailand. So as you can see, sapphire colors are increasingly stratified. Now, in February 2019, just 2 months shy from the catastrophic event known as the Sri Lanka Easter bombings, I visited the coastal town called Beruwala. It's a coastal trading town for sapphire. My guide's name was Hatif. He was then a 19-year-old sapphire trader whom I met through a Hong Kong contact, where Hatif attended an annual jewelry fair. So on my first Wednesday in Beruwala, Hatif and I went to the bustling Patte gem market. So just to give you a sense, Beruwala is down south. It's about an hour from Colombo by train, in the blue dot there. And this is a photo of Patte, the gem market in a place called China Fort in Beruwala. Now, as we made our way down, so Sri Lanka, Beruwala is one of the most popular destinations for sourcing sapphires, both rough and cut. And so we've arrived there in Beruwala in February 2019. So as we made our way down the main street of the gem market, Hatif joked to me. He said, "Don't be nervous, we are only among 500 men." Hatif was not wrong. Beruwala dealers placed the population of traders at the peak trading time in Patte at a roughly 5 to a staggering 800. It made any conservative estimate of the cash flow a whopping, in these markets, a whopping number. Barricaded by walls of men are gem offices on each side of the street, wherein I am told high-quality stones are sold by, I quote, big men. Metaphorically, but sometimes also literally. Thin and lanky, my interlocutor Hatif moved with ease through the crowd, greeting friends and acquaintances along the way, but frequently looking behind to make sure I was keeping up. His fashionably gelled hair, buzz cut, and tight shirt-pant combination made him stand out from the crowd. The lingua franca in China Fort is Tamil, and as too is the ethnicity of most traders and brokers. By then, Hatif had learned that I was not as interested in buying sapphires as I was in the personal trajectories of the people who sold them, and made sure I got to meet the, I quote him, talkative ones. In the months leading up to my arrival in Sri Lanka, we had gotten to know each other through a mutual gem dealer. And while I had often spoken about the reason spurring my interest in the gem trade, the writing of a thesis in anthropology, Hatif somehow had always believed that I would eventually turn buyer. Turning to the sociality of the market and its main actors, Hatif described that apart from me, Muslim, there are also many people from Ratnapura, all Sinhalese. But my friend Himash that you'll be meeting is just like me, also Muslim. Hatif's emphasis on his friend's religious identity highlights how ethnic and religious affiliations permeate daily interactions in the gem trade. But at the time, I was largely unaware of how these relations of difference would complicate a trade in a research site I had yet to understand. But Hatif's remark foreshadowed the ways in which religious identities shape social exchange, right? So just for some context, Sri Lanka has seen rising sort of ethnic and religious tensions in recent decades. And within the gem trade, these have erupted into riots, what they call riots disrupting the supply chain between the predominantly Sinhalese Buddhist mining region around Ratnapura, which you saw earlier. Here you can see Ratnapura, and the predominantly Muslim Tamil-speaking traders in Berwala by the coast. But during my visit, I did not witness any discord, but in private, simmering worries over potential violence were constant. Now, finally, we ducked into Himash's office, who, according to Hatif, is a big man of the market. Does Himash also buy from Ratnapura like you? I asked, thinking about the mining site where Hatif acquires his new material. Yes, but he buys from Thailand too. That's where he gets many of these Kashmir sapphires, said Hatif. He said, with a smile, you know, he added, the kind you people like best. I was puzzled for a moment, then realized he was referring to the hype in the color royal blue created by the 2018 Christie's auction of the peacock necklace in Hong Kong, which created a real hype in East Asia. The necklace, as you can see here, features 21 saturated royal blue sapphires purportedly from Kashmir. Now, this iconic hue has enticed buyers across East Asia and beyond, and it was the same blue that Hatif, Himash, and others were seeking in these global markets. Now, once in the office, and after hearing Hatif introduce me as a researcher from Taiwan, attending a university in Hong Kong, but living in Pakistan, Himash, a stout man wearing a checkered shirt, beamed. Gesturing towards himself, he commented that we were, in fact, not that different. You see, we live in Berwala, but we also go to Hong Kong and Taiwan, Himash laughed. At this comparison, I stammered and said I was in fact not dealing in stones, but writing a thesis. Ignoring my comment, Himash went on to describe the places he stayed in Hong Kong and the appreciation for vivid colors in Taiwan. When I asked about the connections to other gem trading hubs in the region, Hatif interjected. He said, 10 years ago, you know, people used to go to Pakistan too, but now no more. We have Africa. Now, this statement revealed the emergence of new mining frontiers, right, in a continent of long-term colonial extraction in Africa, now eagerly exploited by gem merchants who make profit through asymmetric global relations of exchange. The gem trade really expands astonishing geographic distances. With each emergence of a gem site of extraction, circuits of trade are created or in turn halted. The speed of change in frontier spaces, as Anat Singh writes, through boom and bust cycles can be truly dizzying. Over the last decade, Madagascar emerged as a leading producer of sapphire in the world and drew the interest of many Berwala dealers. At the height of the Madagascar gem rush, some of the most industrious sapphire dealers from Berwala went from sourcing their sapphires in Ratnapura, the mining site I showed earlier, to Madagascar. So sapphires originating from Madagascar do not only cover long distances to reach Berwala, where they are cut, polished, and traded, but they also change countless hands before they reach places where marginal profit is highest. And we'll get to Thailand in a bit. Now, throughout our interview, a stream of men shuffled in and out of Himash's office, removing their shoes at the door. They came bearing parcels of gems to offer the dealer. One middle-aged broker strode in, wearing a red checkered sarong and shirt. He revealed a remarkable sapphire from his parcel, a stone of an enormous size. Dramatically, he asked Himash for 1 million Sri Lankan rupees. That is, at that time, it was roughly $3,000 US. Unfazed, Himash coolly counter-offered 600,000, roughly US dollar 1,800. And crestfallen, the broker swiftly departed. Turning to me, Himash muttered dismissively, "It's not even a royal blue." I leaned closer to examine the sapphire that you see on the right here. As sunlight from the window hit the glass table, other gem parcels glittered with an indistinguishable blue hue. And soon another elderly man arrived bearing more sapphires to show. Dazzled by the array of colors and shapes, I lost all track of size and pricing in a moment of sensorial overload. Sorting through these stones is a sensory labor and skill that dealers are trained to perform with meticulousness, and for risk is omnipresent. Unlike olfactory fatigue that rises from a continuous smelling at different scents, as Himash puts it, dealers claimed that their parsing over 100 pieces of blue sapphires does not exhaust their ability to visually ascertain quality of color. If anything, Hatif added, it hones their sensitivity and appreciation for sapphire colors and in, quote, inclusions, which are minerals trapped within a mineral. I'm not sure if you can see on the slide here. You can see some inclusions in this one, in the lot on the left. Unlike second generation dealer Himash, Hatif had only been in the gem trade for about 4 years. Though not yet even 20, he took far greater financial risks than I had in my 30s. When starting out, his mother gave him only about $100 in capital. Yet Hatif was very street smart and passionate about the stones that were flowing through Berwala, his hometown. He enjoyed, in particular, studying their color, their brightness, their clarity. With the $100 that were given by his mother, his sole savings then, he purchased one gem that he sold quickly and then made a profit of over 500. Emboldened, he reinvested in another stone, but then ended up losing everything that he earned from the previous. This early failure taught him that, about the capriciousness of the trade. A visit to a gem show in Colombo became then the turning point of his new vocation. It was in Colombo that he met his, I quote him, big brother Habibullah, who then taught him about the specificities of sapphire quality, especially in terms of color and hue. That was the first step, and then finding one's customers was the next. His profits then grew with each stone sold. Through the savviness in social media that is common in his generation, Hatif discovered a world of buyers outside of Berwala. Hatif's trajectory, in fact, mirrors that of many other young men in Pakistan's Peshawar who entered the gem trade in recent years. They source specific stones from nearby mining sites, build networks and affiliations in the process, and some forge kinship ties accessing unfamiliar markets. So in just 5 years, Hatif had progressed from humble beginnings of a 16-year-old to a relatively savvy gem trader. And now he travels frequently to Hong Kong and Taiwan, courting foreign buyers. One evening back at his Berwala home, Hatif spoke fondly about Taiwan to me. Before trading sapphires, I knew nothing about Taiwan. Now I go there several times a year and know it quite well, he told me. I joked that he now visits my home country far more than I do. But the Taiwan Hatif knows is entirely through mercantile networks that have over the years also helped him build up capital. Although these are primarily business-oriented interactions, he refers to his brokers as, I quote him, just like family. In recounting his Taiwan experiences, Hatif emphasized the sensory dimensions of interaction with stones, studying their variegated tones and hues under light. He and his Taiwanese partners share this love for sapphires, and these social interactions around sapphire allowed Hatif to also develop specific knowledge of the local gem market and shared connoisseurly aesthetics of sapphires that differ a lot between places and peoples. For example, he described a broad generalization in what buyers bought. Taiwanese prefer, I quote him, royal and peacock blue, so deeper saturated hues. Europeans tend towards cornflower blue, a lighter and less saturated shade. Hatif tuned into these nuances, distinguishing customers' preferences. His experience revealed how appreciation of sapphire color relies truly on cultural perspectives. And his success owes to both the technical knowledge and cultural intuition gained through his trading relationships. In that way, Hatif moves sapphires not just across borders, but between distinct regimes of value and meaning. This multi-local nature of the life of Hatif and many others also forces me, the ethnographer, to reckon with the ways in which regional worlds are experienced, constructed, and lived through trade. Now, in the second part of my presentation, I want to turn to the account of Shehzad, one of my main Pakistani interlocutors, who came to Berwala, Sri Lanka, in search of royal blues, and in so doing also made it a home. So Shehzad arrives usually in Pata, the gem market in Berwala, after conducting Zuhar prayers in the privacy of his host's home. Having spent more than 9 years shuttling between Pakistan and Sri Lanka, he could by then converse competently in basic Tamil, at least enough to not depend on English when it came to numbers. Milhar is the name of his broker. Milhar is also his friend and host. He has sojourned so frequently to Berwala that Shehzad considers himself, and I quote, a family member of Milhar's, and Milhar's wife, his sister. While Shehzad's time in Sri Lanka is deeply shaped by his relations with Milhar, I was nonetheless surprised to learn that he remained a paying guest in his friend's home even after 9 years. Now, the gem trade is built on an economy of affection, as relations of kinship are created through trust and codependence in business, as much as through religious affinity. The gemstone business, Shehzad tells me repeatedly, is based on trust, an intangible sentiment that manifests as tangible actions. So if one is to be entrusted in or with the intimacies of another's home and family member, one should also be trusted to act according to the ethics of exchange. That they are all transacting across difference in the gem trade for profit does not preclude one's moral duty of repaying their host when placed in the intimate realms of their home. Unlike the young Hatif, whom I spoke about earlier, who operated and learned the trade mostly alone, Shehzad had been brought into this world of gems through gold at a young age by his jeweler father in Lahore. Like father, like son, jaise baap waise beta, he said, I'm always on the move. Shehzad described the mobile lives he shared with his father. Over the last 2 decades, he had acquired a deep knowledge of the gem trade and specifically sapphires. With sapphires as his primary trade, Sri Lanka became inevitably a second home base. Shehzad's father immersed him in gems from a very young age, initiating him into the trade. He imparted not just technical expertise, but also an intrepid spirit. Shehzad now follows his father's footsteps to source stones outside of Pakistan. His later ties to Sri Lanka reflect the geography of quality that guides merchants like Shehzad to these different sources. When he traveled to Sri Lanka for the first time in 2014, he recalled the stones being, I quote him, very cheap. He purchased on credit initially, but learned that buying with cash often gained him a better deal. 2014 was also the year of a series of anti-Muslim violence in southwestern Sri Lanka that preceded campaigns led by the Bodu Balasena, BBS. The towns affected were several towns in the Kalutara district and also in Berwala, where the wholesale market for gems is located. And these Bodu Balasena-led protests, marches in several towns near Berwala led to an escalation of clashes and attacks on Muslim-owned property. So during that time, Shehzad had returned to Pakistan, but had made plans, eager to return to Sri Lanka. He cancelled his trip after speaking with Milhar, who informed him of potential riots that could endanger other Muslim traders and asked him not to come. Since then, Shehzad had traveled to and from Sri Lanka in search of the stones described as Ceylon or royal blue. So the terms Ceylon and royal blue become themselves analytical categories in which actors ascribe value, even if they're ultimately subjective and debated. They readily lend themselves to thick description, to borrow Clifford Geertz's concept, in negotiations between dealers of sapphires. These may not necessarily be verbalized in negotiations. Hatif, for example, often gauges the color, I quote him, with himself, an internal dialogue that culminates in his decision to bargain and for how much. Parsing through hundreds of stones a day, Hatif has certain kinds of sapphires in his mind, right, steered by his buyer's tastes in Taiwan. Now, coming back to Shehzad. So Shehzad recounted his personal trajectory. He said, "When I was just in 10th grade, I started helping my father in his gold shop. He was in dire straits. Though I dreamed of banking, he insisted that I join the family business. During my graduation, he met someone promising UK student visas. Moving abroad, he thought, could improve our fortunes. But the man turned out to be a fraud, so we lost a lot of money. After researching student visas for myself, I finally left for the UK in 2011. Don't ask me how. Those early days were filled with hardship, surviving on odd jobs while studying. And eventually, I began to sell gems. I began selling gems on eBay that my father had sent me from Pakistan. Within months, in 2012, I was earning $5,000 to $8,000 monthly. Unlike Hatif, Shehzad sold mainly to Europe or the UK after spending his formative years there as a student in the UK. He described leaving home amidst his father's declining business in gold to pursue an education abroad. At the same point in time, his father had begun to look into the colored stone sector. Though his initial hopes were, his visa hopes were initially dashed and he struggled, he eventually did manage to move to the UK and built himself an eBay gemstone operation. Through a transnational family collaboration, Shehzad then gained a foothold in the European market. Now, a key to Shehzad's success on eBay was, in fact, his father traveling, so they're from Lahore, traveling to Peshawar in the early 2010s from Lahore to source rough minerals, minerals known as tourmaline, sapphire, emeralds, which were largely mined in Afghanistan. Over time, his father also learned that many sapphires arrived not just from Afghanistan, but also from Thailand and Sri Lanka. So before online sales dominated the trade, dealers from Peshawar used to travel from Peshawar to places like Lahore to sell, but eBay has revolutionized the trade. Shehzad realized that certified, as in certified by Gemological Lab, certified Sri Lankan sapphires brought the highest profits selling online. Traveling and meeting other members of the industry also introduced them to a range of techniques to enhance a stone's color quality. I'll come back to this late in my last section. Through new connections and mobility, Shehzad and his father cultivated a path for upward mobility. And through Shehzad and Hatif, I became acquainted with another side that I won't be able to delve into as much detail in Thailand's Chantaburi. So in the final section of my presentation, I'm going to take us briefly to Chantaburi, where the pursuit of a certain kind of blue is shaped by these techniques of transforming the color of corundum. So Chantaburi, this is the map is marking the province of Chantaburi. There's also a city by the name of Chantaburi within Chantaburi province. So located 250 kilometers from Bangkok, Talat Ploy, which literally in Thai means gem market, is a place in Chantaburi that transforms into a trading center every weekend, much like in Beruwala, and offers local and international buyers a wide range of colored stones, many of which are today sourced from rough material in various parts of Africa, but processed in cutting and heating factories in Thailand. Ask any local for ploy gems will guide one to the main streets of the Sichan Road and the side streets of Soi Krachang. This is a photo of the Sichan Road. So the city of Chantaburi is well known by tourists for its Chinese, Vietnamese, and French influences in the urban landscape. However, it is actually the dynamic and lively weekend in this gem market that conjures a contemporary transnational space as the epicenter of global gem circuits and investment. While only a few dealers can be found seated along the Sichan Road during the week, come mid-mornings on Fridays, the market transforms into a truly multinational site, dense with interaction across languages, ethnicity, nationality, and class. Now, spatially, the size of the market space also increases in the weekends, spilling into the neighboring streets and alleys as hundreds of dealers from various countries in East Asia, South Asia, North America, Europe, and Africa take up to setting up makeshift stands or sit at tables that you see in the slide here within these open air, what I call open air coffee shops, or formerly open air coffee shops. For another interlocutor of mine from Peshawar named Amar, roughly the same age as Shehzad in his 30s, the allure of Chantaburi lies not just in its trade, but in its transformative heat treatment furnaces. In 2004, Amar told me that he acquired a substantial 5-carat, carat is CARAT is the unit of measurement for gemstones, roughly 0.2 grams. So he had acquired this 5-carat, really large, rough sapphire. He cleaved it into 4 pieces to be treated separately. So he gave it to what they call a burner, someone who operates a heat treatment furnace. The results, he said, were astonishing. A single fragment of one of the cleaved stones sold for 20% above his initial investment for the entire stone. Such windfall profits fuel the dreams of dealers who seek to transform poorly colored rough sapphires into highly lucrative gems. But treatment is also a precarious gamble, right? Another trader told me that he sunk an entire fortune into an exceptional rough sapphire. So instead of enhancing the color, the furnace fire broke the stone. Sapphires, which require oxygen to change color, are typically heat treated in open fire kilns, fueled by either coal or natural gas. Whereas rubies, also of a similar mineral variety, are heat treated in more advanced electric ovens with temperature control. So in Bangkok, I am told over 95% of rubies and sapphires have been heat treated. However, due to soaring demand and inadequate natural sources, dealers worldwide now depend on treatment to generate marketable supplies. Heated stones have become essential to meet demand, basically, because the problem lies in the scarcity of royal and cornflower blues, the most coveted hues you saw earlier. Heat treatment operations also remain a guarded secret in the industry. They are also an art and science. So when I visited a facility with Amar in 2019, I was barred from taking any photos. I was told that our entry relied solely on the burner's relationship, burner being the person who operates the heat treatment furnace. His relationship with Amar, outsiders like me, were rarely allowed. So here in Chantaburi, you can see that the quest to transform and profit from rough sapphire shapes this region, right? Binding traders in their shared hope for the desirable color. While seeking personal gain, they are also connected by reliance on local expertise and technical knowledge not found elsewhere. To conclude, I want to briefly just revisit this notion of regional worlds created through the gem trade and my interlocutors, as well as this role of materiality that moves certain kinds of stones and people in certain directions of trade. The gem trade hinges upon the mobility of dealers to venture into new sites for new material. And as we know, mobility is also hindered by, is also a very, different people have different access to mobility. Service providers and online trading platforms such as eBay and social media unfold new connectivities, cultural sensibilities, and geographic spaces into the circuits, enabling upward mobility for some. Conflict, interreligious or otherwise, emerges as a force in halting the segment of the trade on one hand, and moving it into new directions. The shift to Sri Lanka brought my attention to the specificities of social differences in the gem trade as played out between the religious minority, Tamil-speaking Muslims, who were also primarily traders or cutters, and the majoritarian Sinhala Buddhist miners or mine leaseholders. This complicates the cadence and dynamics of exchange in ways that differ from what I had observed in the Pakistani segment of the trade, where all of the traders are Muslims, but who transacted across national Afghan versus Pakistani and ethnic Pashtun versus Punjabi differences. The anthropologist Elizabeth Ferry writes that the enduring appeal of minerals as objects of beauty is contingent upon a receptive and capable audience that can truly appreciate their aesthetic qualities. To find this audience, it is necessary not only to move to major commercial centers, but to specific trading places that are integral to the trade of colored stones. The effectiveness of market traders relies on their adept understanding of spatial connections and their ability to leverage mobility in their favor. Now, mobility, as I mentioned, is highly contingent upon one's national, class, and gendered identity. Sapphires drew men to move across political landscapes, immigration regulations, and anti-minority riots in search of livelihood and profit. In so doing, they also create new kinship ties, bearing resemblance to trading diasporas with an infrastructure of trust, and an imagined gem community that allows for new understandings of identification. Thank you.
Maybe, yeah. Thank you. That was really lovely. I've heard you present your work, but in a more, under a more general heading in terms of the larger project, but to zero in on one particular site and to just look at a couple of people, I think gives us a very different picture of how you're making the argument. I'm sure there'll be many questions. I did have a comment or two myself, but I'll wait until others have spoken first. Leila, would you like to say anything since you can't stay till the end?
Sorry. No, I was just also just very struck by, as you say, the kind of mobility not only of these gems, right, but what you're so good at tracing is the mobility of these people as well. And what's really interesting, so this is more of a comment, less of a question, but about the ways in which they accumulate their expertise, right, as they move from place to place to place. So I think that came out very nicely in the talk. Yeah, and I'd love if there are questions to be had. I'll think of some more. Thanks.
Let us know if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question. You can raise your hand first, your virtual hand. And it'd be lovely if you could put on your cameras, please.
Thanks for that. It was really lovely, and I really enjoyed the presentation. I'm not going to articulate as well, but I was really interested in the language of family and kinship that was used, and I kind of wondered. It seemed like the language is mainly about, from what I heard, at least brothers and sisters, sort of horizontal language, and I wondered whether, I presume lots of these people seem to be also the sons of former dealers or traders and things from generations back. And so I wondered whether within the community, this imagined community, there is a sense of kind of vertical family, a language of children and fathers who pass on things, and whether that moves across country and realm. So do people in Taiwan talk about a trader from Sri Lanka whose father came before, and now the son is coming? And so does that family network kind of hold together through generations across boundaries, or does it like collapse or kind of fade away? And the other question I had was really about the role of kind of success. Like, does the imagined community rest on the success of the individual people involved? If someone starts to lose money, can they fall out of the community completely and then disappear? Do they need to be successful basically to stay within that community? So those are my kind of two sort of questions. But yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, hi, Alistair. These are great questions. So I'll respond to the first one about thinking about kinship and relations between different individuals. So you have the sort of more conventional way of thinking about kinship as, blood ties, right? So in this case, Shehzad and his father, for example, and many, many more. And I will just add that in Peshawar, my main field site in northwest of Pakistan, close to the border of Afghanistan, where the largest mineral trading hub can be found, most of these, the big traders or big men, as they like to call them, are from intergenerational trading families. So father, or perhaps even grandfather, who started off mining or trading gems, and then passing passing their family business onto their sons, and then sons and cousins, and in Peshawar you see this very clearly. Many of the people I interviewed are cousins of other interlocutors that I know, and they operate in a very tight-knit and group. So, and that also means that access to stones of a specific kind, let's say if one person is a specialist of tourmaline, and they have access to these mines, they also keep that within this family network, within kin, which you probably won't see in the examples that are given in Sri Lanka, in which the kinships the kinship ties I'm talking about are established across dealers of different ethnicities. But I will say that that religious identity is really also very central to the ways in which people establish ties with each other. And then you hear this emphasized often, that, for example, in the case that I had given about Milhar telling Shehzad, not to come. I mean, not to come also means that he's also losing out on profits, on a commission, right? But telling him not to come because it's, it could be potentially dangerous. And nothing, of course, happened to Milhar, but and I think Shehzad, looking back, was deeply appreciative of the fact that that his broker, his friend, warned him about the times when so-called riots would happen in Beruwala. So yeah, so I think it's just really interesting. In the beginning, I had thought about using the word like artificial kin, but many friends who work on kinship are like, there is nothing that isn't. It's kinship should be a very large umbrella word that includes all of these different relations of difference. Now, the second part of your questions is whether traders needed to stay successful, right, in order to be part of this community. I guess my short answer is no, because there are many people who don't succeed and who continue to kind of also live off others in the trade. And I won't speak for Sri Lanka, but I will speak for in the Pakistani case. So I've been following this gem trade for several years now, and I try to go back as frequently as I can. And the last time I went back to Peshawar, which was last year in July, I went to see some of my my main interlocutors, and also some of these men that I've never really spoken to, but who always loitered in different workshops, cutting workshops. And I found out that they were basically doing the same thing year after year. And I asked them, how is business going? And they tell me that, no, it's not great. I'm still not able to make enough capital to be able to invest in a lot like the successful traders. But nonetheless, they stay there, and they do spend a lot of time in these workshops, these artisanal workshops where gem cutters would cut their stones. And so you have many men. And I will also add that over the last 3 years, the number of gem traders in this market that I study in Peshawar has exploded. When I was there the first time in 2016, people tell me that there must have been maybe about 4,000 in total, including all the gem cutters and traders and people who shuttle between mines and markets. And this last time I went back, and I don't know if this is an exaggeration, but they said there were over 20,000. So the numbers have really, and it's just hard to believe that all 20,000 is, of the dealers in this gem trading community are successful, right? I think a lot of people enter this trade coming from precarious backgrounds, interestingly, because for me, at least for someone like me to enter the gem trade, I'm always told that I need a lot of capital, right? You need the capital to buy these stones. But inversely, in Peshawar, what you see is that many of the people who enter this trade are people who come from rural areas, people who are displaced in what was the former federally administered tribal areas, displaced by conflicts, right? And who end up in Peshawar and who decide to enter this trade because there's just not a lot of opportunities available in Peshawar. There's a high rates of unemployment, and this affects people who of a specific class far more than others. Yeah, so I'll just say that they don't need to stay successful to stay in this trade.
Thanks.
I know Brian has raised his hand, but we have a question in the chat box that was sent to me separately. This is from Shruti Prasad, and she's asking, I quote, I was curious about the mobility of buyers and whether the casual buyer has direct access to these market networks, or does it shift over to retail trade for consumers of sapphire, perhaps dissociated from the kinship networks of trade?
Great, thank you, Shruti. So sorry if I understood the question correctly. It's whether whether one had to be, if you were in the gem trade, whether one had to be connected to these kinship networks in order to access these production sites. Is that correct? Did I get that right, Deja? I would say that these sites are very well known, and they're well known to people who are within this industry, who operate within this industry. So Birwala, for example, for many years has been a center for sapphire trade. And yes, indeed, if you wish to buy sapphires, you can go there by yourself. And in fact, many people do. So when I was in Birwala in 2019, the time that I was there, the few weeks that I spent there, you do see foreigners coming into the main market and getting a sense of the market prices. But it is also true that if you come in without any contact, without any sort of broker, like the way Shehzad operates, then you wouldn't really know who to go to, and you wouldn't also know what prices are, unless you are a seasoned gem trader. You wouldn't really know. And price is always very, it fluctuates depending on your relations, and fluctuates also depending on who you are as a person, right? So the prices won't be the same for someone who is coming in from the outside. I also interviewed a Taiwanese gem trader, a woman who has been going to Sri Lanka for over 5 years now, and in the beginning, she said everything was extremely expensive. She couldn't afford anything, but it was after spending many times, and hiring a broker, someone like Shehzad's Milhar, that she got to a point where she could purchase parcels of sapphires in order to sell back in Taiwan. So yeah, so yes and no. I guess you don't have to be part of this industry, but one often enters this trade through a contact, right? So these initial ties are central to this trade.
Brian, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Alice, for this wonderful talk. I have to apologize that I might have to leave in a couple minutes, but just a short question. I was sort of struck because I don't know about anything about the jewelry trade, but I was always listening to your talk. I was always thinking about the diamond trade in Africa, which is dominated by big conglomerates, and I'm rather interested as to how sapphire, as you have said, has this attraction for so many years, way back to the days of the empire, that there's not something like I don't know what the name of that company that dominates the diamond trade in Africa, and it's still sort of left to this sort of so-called pre-modern networks that goes from coast to coast, but then they are, as you brilliantly pointed out, is still relying on this sort of network of affinities. So my question perhaps is what made the sapphire trade sort of different to the diamond trade? Was it because of the locations of where the trade was carried out? Was whether there were other factors that went into it, especially in terms of the larger historical development of this trade in this part of the world?
Hi, Brian. Yeah, that is a great question. And I do often, not just to academics, but often people who hear about, gem trade often ask me about diamonds, because that is the most, I guess, popular kind of luxury commodity. So yeah, the diamond trade and the color. Oh, so these are two distinct industries. Colored stone trade and diamond trade. They're distinct, and precisely because of what you had just mentioned, right? Diamond is often more dominated by these conglomerates, and you're thinking about De Beers, right? De Beers, which has in some ways monopolized the diamond industry, releasing small bits of supplies here and there in order to create, in order for prices to to inflate diamond prices. But an interesting observation made by actually a diamond trader whom I know, who's both Gujarati, Jain, and lives in Antwerp. He says if you open the vaults of the Antwerp, the vaults of the safes for diamonds would really cost like sand. And that goes to show just how much more prevalent the diamonds are than colored stones. So colored stones, like sapphires, rubies, emeralds, that's what I mean by colored stones, gemstones more generally, right? They are primarily mined through artisanal gem mining, so small scale compared to diamonds, have small scale operations that happen in I would say over 90 countries in this world. Over 90 countries. They're usually happening in South Asia and Latin America, Southeast Asia, and now more recently Africa, but also many parts of Europe and America, but and obviously much smaller sizes. In these small operations, so Sri Lanka is one of the oldest gem extraction sites for corundum, and which is also why they've developed heat treatment both in Thailand and Sri Lanka hundreds of years ago, by heating sapphires over literally a flame, right, in order to change its color. So if you trace back the histories of these techniques, you'll be able to see just how how abundant these places are in colored stones. So yeah, in that way, it's very different from the diamond trade. In some ways, the artisanal nature of its extraction also means that there is much smaller production of colored stones than diamonds, contrary to the belief that diamonds are rare and so forth, right? Actually, colored stones are much rarer. And even rarer are colored stones that are of quote unquote gem quality, so crystals, right? So in the book, I also write about how, we have this understanding of like mining as just people just extract, and then you extract these crystals out, and then all of that is worth a lot of money. It's not true. A lot of the emeralds that have been extracted in different mines can also come out opaque. So opaque green beryl, right? That is also known as emerald, but it's not of the kind of quality that would qualify for it to be cut and faceted and polished and then sold in like single pieces, the way that we see those high quality sapphires have been sold. So just to give you a sense of just how there's a rarity of the stone itself, and there's a rarity of the formation of crystals within that stone, right? Transparent crystals. And so in all of that makes this increases the value of the gems. But as we know, like economic value is constructed, right, by different players in the market. And in the diamond industry, they've been these corporations have been very successful. And it's not just corporations, but also marketing techniques, right? To market in the 1920s that a diamond is forever has really sedimented in people's minds and connecting this forever quality of the diamond with marriage itself, right? And in ways that oblige people to think that they have to buy a diamond ring in order to get married, in order to profess some sort of undying love for the other, right? So these are the ways in which the diamond industry has very successfully shaped and constructed for consumers of luxury goods that colored stones, on the other hand, have not been able to do as much. So just some of these different characteristics, both in terms of the extraction and also the distribution and consumption of diamonds and colored stones. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
When we meet physically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have to read out a question from Kosha Oza, who asks, how do issues of sustainability and ethical sourcing intersect with the sapphire trade in Beruwara and Shantaburi?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I don't know who asked the question, but the questions of supply chain transparency and ethical gems have been very much part of the industry discourse for the last, I would say 3 decades now. And actually, it started with the diamond industry, and most of you must know this term now, like blood diamond, right? A conflict diamond. This idea that the extraction of certain kinds of gems have been used to fund militancy in countries, and typically we're talking about Africa here, in Congo. But in the colored stone trade, many of these extraction places are also intricately tied to either movements, militant movements within countries. I'll talk about the case that I know best, which is in Afghanistan, rather not Sri Lanka, but as you know, stones are very mobile and they move around and they pass through different hands. And in passing through different hands, it's very easy to lose track of where these stones truly come from. So as someone who studies this gem trade, I would say that a lot of this transparency and is not it's difficult to determine where a stone is truly from, right? How do you trace the origins of a stone through the last person who sold it to you? It's difficult. So in some ways it's a big paradox, right? The idea that there's some sort of system that can control, that can truly track the commodity chain as it moves, right? And the diamond trade, they've tried to do this with the Kimberley system, but still, I think it's dubious. So for the sapphires, sorry, not sapphires, but many of the extraction sites in Afghanistan have been over the years controlled by different groups. And following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, a lot of the war efforts were actually, in fact, funded through mining emeralds and lapis lazuli. So the Northern Alliance, predominantly in Panjshir, they monopolized emerald trading, or rather extracted a large profit from whatever was sold through the emeralds that have been mined in Panjshir. And this is quite well known with the very famous Northern Alliance leader, Ahmedabad Massoud, famously developed this emerald trade in ways that connect Panjshir as early as the 1970s to several groups across the world, like elite commerce groups, in order to sell emeralds in order to fund war efforts. So they're connected to these, and it's very complicated because after the Taliban takeover, a lot of these operations now pay a commission to the Taliban. So these affiliations, they move a lot, and it's hard to say what many stones are tainted by such operations. But you see a lot of the people who are involved in this trade, they contest these associations, of course, right? They don't want people to think that what the gems that they are selling are in fact, tied to these specific groups. And but it's difficult. I think it's hard to have a true sense of the provenance of a gem. And I think at the end of the day, the people who suffer the most when you have scandals about, blood, emeralds or whatever, are the people whose livelihoods are most connected to the extraction sites, and also whose lives are the most precarious, because they're the ones who are doing the mining. They're the ones who are whose livelihoods depend on that in times of duress and war. So yeah, I think the question of sustainability and transparency is very complicated, and yeah, it's hard, I think, to say that, can truly determine you can truly have a transparent commodity chain, especially in the places where colored stones are found.
There's one more question in the chat box. Asta Gaur is asking, what role do gender dynamics play in determining who becomes a trader or becomes powerful in the sapphire market? Maybe prompted by a reference to the Taiwanese woman buyer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Further, in your experiences in South Asia, did you come across any influence of caste in determining who takes up sapphire trading as a profession?
Thank you, Asta. It's a great question. Well, so gender, as you can tell, truly shapes this market. This trade is very gendered, especially in this part of in South Asia. Not so much in Southeast Asia, but in South Asia, and especially in Pakistan and in Sri Lanka, you can see that the gem trade is mostly, if not entirely, dominated by men. There are a few exceptions, of course, but and you can tell from the photos in Beruwala, and I could also show you photos of in Peshawar, where the market where I was based is entirely dominated by men. And this is the direct result of both the kind of social the gender dynamic of these public spaces in that part of Pakistan, but also just it's a reflection of the of gender roles in society, where trading is and business on the outside is operated by men, and so there is so it truly shapes every segment of the trade until you get to Southeast Asia, where my Pakistani interlocutors then they discover that there's a world of women who dominate the trade in Vietnam, and also in I wouldn't say in Thailand, but there's a lot of women who are brokers in Chanthaburi that you saw earlier, that the trading town, the coastal trading town south of Thailand, and it's and over time people get used to these different sort of characteristics of different markets, that in Peshawar it is you will deal only with men, and once you head to Bangkok, then it becomes more democratized. To the question of how did you also ask how has gender shaped my research experiences? In any case, I can talk about it. So yeah, when I first started doing research on the gem trade, I was not fully aware. I guess I was not fully. I did not anticipate how difficult it would be to be, a woman and foreign, and East Asian person doing research on like a very male-dominated trade. This affected the ways in which I was able to spend time in the market. I would never stay in the market after sundown. It shaped my day-to-day interactions with people. Yeah, it was it is something that is truly unique to the gem trade, I think, but precisely because it's both very gendered, but then in other parts of the world where, because the luxury economy, it's interesting, there's an inversely gender dimension of the gem trade in which the trade itself is dominated by men, but we imagine that the end consumer would be a woman, right? Who else wears colored stones? So that kind of, that opposition is really interesting. But what I found in the gem trade is that, in fact, many of these stones don't eventually end up on the necks and ears of women, but in fact, they continuously roam in this global market, right? Many of these stones just end up roaming from one place to the other, accruing in value, devaluating as it moves along the commodity chain. And in some ways, it's a industry that is difficult to penetrate unless you have the ties. And so I'm deeply, I'm really truly admire women who dominate the trade in different parts of this world. In Taiwan, especially, there are many women who have taken up the role as a gem trader, but more often than not, having studied gemology at some reputable gemological institute, and who then tap into like maybe the I would say the highest echelons of the trade itself. So yeah, so this is also very, very class, not just gendered, but also very class. So there are people who can, and especially I think more so than gender, I think what also determines how your mobility is your nationality. So European, American traders that I've interviewed, who are mostly men also, are able to tap into those the highest echelons of the gem trade, in which they can buy cheaply from these places and then sell at an exorbitant price in Europe. So yeah, so the gem trade is very stratified. It's not just gendered, but also classed and racialized. And sorry, I forgot the second part of your question.
The question is about caste in South Asia.
Oh yeah,
and
caste.
that determines who takes up gem trading as a profession.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Because I've read the literature on the gem trade in India, and I know that is the case, and it does truly affect, especially in Jaipur, where, in fact, many of the pioneer gem cutters in Pakistan are from. So they're the families who set up the first, I would say, one of the earliest gem industries in Karachi, and are basically Muslim artisans from Jaipur who immigrated, who migrated during the time of partition, and have become over time Pakistanis, and their sons now work in the same the workshops in gem cutting, and it's through them that I got to learn also a little bit about how how caste shapes this trade, even if many people may not call it caste. So many of the artisans who cut stones rather than trade are of a specific caste from Jaipur, and I'm not sure if I'm not entirely sure that caste would really shapes the main market that I study in Bish. Sorry, I think
Lost you for a moment.
Yeah, my Zoom, I think, got shut down. Sorry. So I would say in Peshawar, my main field site, the more so than caste, what I've noticed is that there are many people who enter the trade as gem cutters. So who get paid an hourly wage or a daily wage on the stones that they cut. Who are kind of at the bottom of the industry. They are typically from rural areas in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa that have been either affected by conflict or who like rural backgrounds, basically rural backgrounds, lower socioeconomic class, but who have, through gem cutting, and there are many cases that I've seen, managed to move upward socioeconomically. So yeah, so more so than that. But I know that in the case of I think there is what's his name, Brian Brazil, who studies the emerald trading Jains, the Shwetambar Jains, who dominate the emerald trade in India, who can speak more, whose work speaks more directly on the questions of caste and how it shapes, and more so than just caste, but also like the religious dimensions of sort of bodily control and the nature of the gem trade itself. He makes this really interesting comparison of the morals, like the subjecthood of the Jain dealer and the kind of violent nature of the trade itself, like that involves making profit through very asymmetrical relations of exchange, right? At times, buying cheap rough and then selling it and getting it cut by people at extremely low wages, and then and how they reconcile it in terms of their religious identity. So yeah, I would point towards the work of Brian Brazil on this. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks so much. I think that's really led to a very fruitful discussion. May I offer a comment? I don't know if it's a comment or a question, but let me try to articulate it. The trade routes that you talked about and that is showed on the map are really pretty ancient. And we have a sense of at least 2,000 years of human history, where people from, say, Afghanistan, Pakistan, that what was earlier, passing through Central Asia, taking the land route to China, and later also taking the sea route via Southeast Asia. So on the one side, the Indian Ocean, the Bay of Bengal, the South China Sea, all coming together as one large oceanic, area, if you like. They're tied together by trade and by the movement of people, both of which you talk about in your own work, yeah? And I was thinking, in what way does the gem trade or the trade in sapphires build on those old roots? I mean, do you have any sense of at what time the gem trade became prominent? And if so, like, but is it also alongside other commodities and other things that were being traded and have been historically traded in this region?
Yeah, but that's a fantastic question. And it's something that I've been sort of grappling with for a very long time, because we have, on the one hand, we know that the gem trade is ancient, right? We know that there's Moors from Muslim traders in Sri Lanka have been moving between many different countries across the Indian Ocean selling sapphires. But at the same time, there's also something very novel about the kinds of networks I'm trying to tease out. I'm speaking specifically of Pakistani traders leaving Pakistan and going to Thailand and participate in this, and also going to Sri Lanka. I say this because the extraction of gems, contrary to what people would think, that, oh, it's, yes, it is. Some of it was part of the Silk Road, but a lot of this kinds of extraction that we see was only enabled through new mining technologies, right? Having excavators, go into, because these are stones that are dug out. I don't have a photo here, but I wish you could see how they're dug out from the Hindu Kush Himalayan mountains, which is an extremely rugged mountain range and an 800-kilometer long mountain range that straddles Central and South Asia. They're formidable places to be doing mining. And I think only possible because of certain conditions, right, in the 1970s. So war is one of them, where dynamite becomes reappropriated to be used to blast holes into the mountain, which I imagine hundreds of years ago, when people were doing that may not have been possible. They may have literally had to dig through the mountain or acquire stones that have, that are on the surface level of the earth. Whereas here, what we see is, if you go to these mines in Afghanistan, you'll see that it is truly through modern mining techniques that people have been able to dig tunnels, right, or they call veins, right, in search of crystal formations. And also through, the last century, where geological exploration, the last 2 centuries, I would say, that have intensified alongside imperialism. So the fact that the British Germans, the Soviets have been doing all these, have been exploring geologically the land in Afghanistan, has enabled people to find new kinds of stones. So in some ways, what I'm showing here is yes, these are the ancient. There are lots of ancient trade routes, but they're very different from what is happening right now, right? These are extraction sites that are exacerbated by contemporary wars. And by a century of like geological exploration, and by people who've been pushed into this industry in the absence of options, right? Like agriculture or gem mining or growing poppies, right? For example, in Afghanistan. So and then the emergence of these markets as a result of the histories of displacement. Peshawar would never have been a center for mineral trading if it had not been for a war in Afghanistan and these multiple invasions in Afghanistan that have led people to be displaced and to move to across the border into Pakistan and then to start this trade there. So my book is trying to show both the histories of displacement that have led to these emergence of these markets, and similarly there's that story of displaced Afghans, and there's also the story of the displaced Indian Muslims from Jaipur who then established a small cutting industry in Karachi, and then who then taught many other people in Peshawar. So it's through these very contemporary histories of displacement that I show how different markets are formed, and similarly with Thailand, which has a long history of mining and rubies, and the annexation of Upper Burma by the British also enabled the East India Company to acquire a lot of rubies. So this is, we think, talking about like the 18th century, late 1880s is when they annexed, annexed Upper Burma. And that was also when they started acquiring large amounts of ruby, which then they started selling back to the colonial metropole. So these are I guess the ties that I'm showing now and the formation of these markets are more recent than I had initially believed, and I think it's closely tied to the social and political conditions of our times.
That is very persuasively formulated. Thank you, Alice. Any other last question? We have 3 or 4 minutes. Go ahead, Devika.
So I have one sort of last question, but just because, I really love this talk, and the discussion also brought up so many sort of new angles. So in that sense, I was sort of like thinking about technology and the sort of like interesting space of technology in this whole story. And you talked about, heat treatment and that becoming a more sort of, and I wondered, what does that do to the value of these stones itself? Because in a sense, in terms of technology, some of what technology does in these cases is facilitate a certain sort of extraction, etc. But too much technology can also sort of, in the case of pearls, etc., can also sort of be seen to diminish the value. So how does that sort of balance? How do people strike this balance? And again, coming to something that you brought up, one of the interesting things that I thought was just the different ways in which people articulate a certain sort of expertise. So in some places, it's through sort of degrees from different places. In some places, it's through family, saying we've been doing this for generations. And so are there different sort of circuits of like through where certain kinds of expertise are seen to be more important than others? So in certain sort of markets, is it more important to have expertise certified through through some sort of a degree, or is it sort of I'll just stop there.
Yeah, thank you, Devika. That the first part of your question is a question that I think industry insiders are particularly concerned with, because value is on everybody's minds, and the fact that I think it is not trivial, but the fact that we can synthesize in a lab in a sapphire and an emerald is a testament to just how how that value is very artificial, right? You can synthesize, so you have the naturally occurring beryl and a corundum, and then you can synthesize in the same chemical physical form the same stone, except it's not naturally occurring. And there are now many ways in which people are trying to develop, techniques to identify which is naturally occurring and which is not. And it's a very difficult, thing to analyze, right? And so this is why it explains also why there's a proliferation of gemology, as a subfield of mineralogy and crystallography. That only emerged in the 1900s, and it has a very interesting origin, connected to the East India Company as well, because it was gemology as an institution was founded by the National Association of Jewelers, and there was a real reason to study gems, right? Because they needed to make sure that whatever they had looted and acquired and plundered in the colonies have value, right? Like what better way than to increase its value by developing a science around it, right? Where people can say, is this naturally occurring? What kind of color is it? Where does it come from, right? All of these have its own criteria of value. So in the book itself, I'm really interested in this idea of provenance, right? Provenance, which we tend to think of as associated to antique or art, right? Where people can value art, and art, the value goes triplefold when it's a painting by Picasso, for example, like where it comes from, right? And in gems, they do the same thing. Auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's employ these ways of valuation by connecting certain kinds of stones to certain places. So, for example, if a stone is certified by a gem lab as originating from Burma or Myanmar, right? Myanmar, the price of that ruby immediately is much higher than another ruby that is perhaps certified from a different country. So I thought this was like it was a conundrum, like why do things of similar size and quality when put next to each other, why is one valued more than the other? So this is like my kind of like research kind, like who determines value, and what is this expertise that is developed around determining quality in luxury commodities. And so very quickly on it, I caught up to this field of gemology and how it's really the field of gemology and these institutions and labs have really expanded across all the Asian metropoles. So if you go, I don't know where you are zooming in from, I'm sure there are lots of gemological institutions in Ahmedabad, and for sure in Jaipur, and for sure in Mumbai, these big cities where there's a gem trading scene. And because the reason why gemological labs are needed is to certify also whether the gem is naturally occurring or it's not, right? Whether it's synthetic, whether it's has been treated by heat. So there are different ways that in which the field has developed in order to determine whether a stone has been treated by whatever methods. And this is a growing field, this is the question that you have is really a question that's been kind of plaguing the industry. It's like, how do we make sure that naturally occurring non-treated gems emerge as the most highly valued? Yeah. And then sorry, I forgot the second part of your question.
Okay, it was about value as well, so
Yeah.
you've sort of answered it already. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Just want to say that Devika is based in Hong Kong, so I'm sure there are lots of gemological, whatever.
Yeah, laboratories, yes. And GIA, for example, Gemological Institute of
well,
America, it's
yeah,
based
yeah.
in Hong Kong. Yeah.
So we're out of time, so let me draw this discussion to a close. We have not had a very large attendance, but everyone's been really engaged with this wonderful first talk of our series. Thank you so much again, Ping-hsiu Alice Lin. We've really enjoyed having you back with us here in Ahmedabad, in a manner of speaking, and hope to see you again through the network or anywhere else that your ideas and your work will take you. All the very best for the book. We hope it comes out soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
you.
See you all.